we'll be sharing with you today, taking turns talking to you about everything that we hope you take away. The format today will be a presentation for the first 45 minutes or so. And then after that, we will change it to a Q&A. So you can ask your questions. That's optional. You don't have to stick around for that. Of course, if you want to, you can feel free to, we'll open up for questions at that time. You may also put your questions in the Q&A or the chat. We'll capture those and get you answers. Also, we are recording this webinar and we will post it on our Solutions Journalism Network YouTube channel after today, so that you can go back and watch it at any time. If in case you have to leave early or you miss something or you want to share this with other people. And then finally, after today, we will send to all of the webinar registrants a mini resource guide. We thought it would be mini, but it's not so many anymore. I think we're at 48 pages of sharing all kinds of nuggets, from what we're talking about today to how-tos to templates for documents. If you're interested or already in a collaborative, how you can use those so that you're not creating them from scratch. We have 15 collaboratives now, so they all have different documents. There's no reason you should have to do that from the very beginning, and take that time. But you can use these as a jumping off point, and of course modify them for your individual needs. So there's are also links to lots of research and other guides that we have written and presented about our collaboratives. So we will have people from our group here, Chris and Alex, dropping some links into the chat where relevant to the slides today. And again, we're thrilled that you're here, thrilled with the turnout. Great to see so many faces, people who are in our network, new faces, and let's get started. Alex, you want to go ahead and share the deck?
Can you see it?
I can see it.
Cool.
Okay, next. Let me explain to you what the Local Media Project is. That is a multi-year initiative launched by SJN with support from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation and the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. We are coming up on the end of the Knight Foundation grant for that at the end of this year. And the one collaborative we have for New York and Michigan, funded by the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation, will go through September 2024. The money from these the foundations with the grant had very specific requests. This is one of SJN's biggest and longest initiatives that we have been working on for these past few years, and our first foray into solutions collaborative journalism. Next. The goals of the Local Media Project are a few of them. First is to strengthen a local media ecosystem. This is recognizing the shrinking of local media in our industry and knowing that news organizations are strapped for resources. They are strapped for ways and ideas and innovation to engage with their audiences. But our collaboratives are all local collaboratives. They are not national, international, across the country or something. They are local, so that the news organizations working together with community organizations are able to really dig in and work together for 2 years to strengthen what they see needs strengthening, depending on their needs. So this is would we say, and you'll probably hear us say today, more than once, that our collaboratives are not prescriptive, because we really believe that each local media ecosystem is different, and the news organizations and the journalists in those places need to own that information and how they want to do it. These collaboratives are also creating a network for more equitable, inclusive news production and distribution, and that's why we have an emphasis not only on solutions journalism, but also attracting different audiences, doing news in different ways, producing news and distributing that news in different ways, being innovative. It's a big part of what we do with our collaboratives, is really encourage innovative thinking and taking on different ways that they haven't explored before in doing their journalism. And then our emphasis on the second year of these 2-year-long collaboratives are really making them ready to be sustainable beyond their 2 years with the funding from the local media project. So the second year, there's emphasis on teaching the project managers, pivotal, very critical role that you'll hear about later, to start to learn how to do grant writing and fundraising so that they can continue beyond their 2 years with us. And we're very proud to say that of our 15 collaboratives that we have convened over the past almost 5 years, 14 of those 15 have gone on to become collaborative. They've continued beyond their work of 2 years. Some of them, Resolve Philly, our very first project, is in their 5th or 6th year now. I'm sure you may be familiar with them, and others that have been equally successful. Next. These are where our collaboratives exist throughout the country. They are all doing different topics, from housing, mental health, climate, economic recovery, caregiving, and issues of race and ethnicity. Some of our collaboratives have continued to do the work on the topic that they initially chose when they started the collaborative. Some have evolved on that, and some have changed topics entirely. Next. We have a unique value proposition in our collaboratives: the intersection of solutions journalism and collaboration. Solutions journalism is evidence-based solutions to problems that are facing a community that sometimes seem intractable, that sometimes are getting only negative news or a lens through a negative lens, where it's a continued coverage of an issue that is bad for people participating in democracy and is not a holistic telling of a story about solutions that are happening in their communities, which compel people to not only get involved, but also, it's not advocacy journalism, get involved by holding leaders accountable. This is, we say solutions journalism is accountability journalism. And so these collaboratives are all tackling the topic that they selected through a solutions journalism lens, not only covering the stories through solutions, but educating their communities and their audience about what solutions journalism is, and then all of them collaborating on that. We also encourage and require actually a much deeper level of collaboration beyond just the editorial project. And that includes engagement events, that includes different ways of getting news out, whether it's through newsletters or through text messaging. We have a lot of engagement depending on the topic and the community organizations involved. The community organizations, we encourage to be part of these collaboratives. They're not advocacy groups or political or partisan organizations. That looks something like nonprofits and higher education. In a few slides, you'll hear from Liza about what kind of partners beyond news organizations that can be part of a collaboration. So it's not just storytelling, it's not just story sharing, it's true collaboration beyond news organizations. It goes beyond co-bylines, it goes to reporting trips together, it goes through bringing that reporting into a community and telling we've found that there are many collaboratives who are able to tell stories in different ways than just words or images. Next. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes to tell you what we've learned over those last few years, or almost 5 years. We have done research. We have met often with our collaboratives. We have captured a lot of information that we've shared, a lot of information we can hope to continue to share. Next. A very important part of the research that we did last year by Elizabeth Hansen and Carrie Porter is about scaffolding for collaboratives. The scaffolding needs, you think of it as building a building and putting building blocks in. Scaffolding needs community first. You need to know what your community is needing in coverage and needing what they need about that particular topic from their news organizations. And you need a high degree of trust from not only the community, but journalists who are working together. And if those are things that you need to be in place before you really launch fully into a collaborative. So that might mean you have to do some upfront work. And that's okay, because that's part of the collaborative process, not just diving headfirst and then doing it, having as an afterthought. Those need to be in place first. That's foundational, because that scaffolding leads to sustained connections beyond the collaborative. People who in your community and audiences are able to see not only the impact of the collaborative, but those connections go far beyond if you pivot to a different topic, for example. Of course, deeper engagement, talking to your communities and your audiences. It also leads to funding and policy outcomes, particularly around those topics that, and all of them do to some degree, have some sort of policy that is addressed or can be addressed through the solutions journalism, and then leads also to community change about a particular topic. Next. We've learned that long-term sustainability is important for these to really be impactful. 2 years is a long time, and when people hear about how long our collaboratives are, they're often not only surprised by the longevity, but feeling a little bit nervous that a collaborative will require that long. Our collaboratives will require that length of time. We are not saying that every collaborative has to be 2 years. We're not, but it is worked for our model, and we have the ability to say that because we've invested in them for 2 years, it's giving these collaboratives the runway to work up to the sustainability beyond their 2 years with us, because the eventual goal is independence. The collaboratives need to own these the work that they're doing and continue it outside of the funding that we have provided and support that we have provided them for 2 years. We are not the project managers of these collaboratives. Each project manager has each collaborative has their own project manager that the collaboratives themselves have hired and brought that person in. So we fully put the decision making into the hands of the collaboratives so that they can continue working together. Collaboratives are always going to have stumbling blocks. It can happen at any time, and they're never not never, but they're rarely a showstopper unless there's not true consensus. We've worked through a lot of big issues, a lot of small issues. So the stumbling blocks will happen, and it's not that they happen, it's how collaboratives solve them and how they solve them together. And finally, culture change is absolutely key to how these collaboratives are able to work together and adapting a new mindset, breaking down the walls of competition among news organizations, bringing in community organizations to be part of their coverage, not just as sources, but as in helping them understand whatever they can bring to the table and seeing things differently beyond just a journalist mindset. So culture is absolutely critical. Next. I'll turn it over to Liza.
Thank you, Amy. So as Amy was pointing out, the collaboratives, or the model of collaboratives that we have developed, is a high commitment, a high level of commitment collaborative. There are many types of collaboratives. In fact, the Center for Cooperative Media has developed a very detailed taxonomy of collaboratives, from less involvement to high involvement, and definitely our model falls in the high involvement area. So we know that joining these collaboratives is an attitude. It's a culture shift for journalists. It challenges a lot of the paradigms we're used to work with. So our goal is to change the mindset of journalists in the belief that if we don't know how to tell stories in a different way, then the consumers or the audiences are not going to be able to consume a different type of material that makes them see issues and problems in a different light. So our second goal, or the goal that comes after the first, is the mindset change among audiences. And we like to feature Ben from our Salt Lake Collaborative, because he was a very vocal skeptic when the Salt Lake Collaborative launched, and now he is a convert. So there is actually a number of recordings from a recent conference where Ben talks about his attitudinal conversion. Next, Alex. So what do you need for this? What do we talk about when we say attitudinal conversion? You have to want to be there. That sounds like a tautology. That sounds like an obvious thing. But what are the components of wanting to be there? First of all, you need to be ready to move out of your comfort zone. Many of us that work in a media ecosystem know everybody else, everybody who works in other outlets, and we have preconceived ideas about these outlets. Ethnic media and digital startups have their thoughts about legacy media. Legacy media has their thoughts about digital startups and ethnic media. So you need to be able to move out of your comfort zone to be able to work with these other participants. So for that, you need to be prepared to confront your biases in terms of who your colleagues are or who else is there in the landscape. And also your biases when you look at your coverage, and what kind of topics have you favored, and what kind of perspectives have you favored in your topics. And solutions journalism is an excellent tool to be able to guide you in this work. Also, do not be transactional. Don't say, okay, I am going to join the collaborative because I know that there is a Hispanic outlet and I always wanted to reach the Hispanic community, so I'll be able to, thanks to them, access the Hispanic community. Yes, that will happen if the collaborative works well, but that should not be the reason why you join the collaborative. If you want to join the collaborative, you're bringing your assets, and everybody else that's coming into this collaborative is bringing their assets. And it should not be looked at, you give me this and I give you that. It's not a tit for tat. It's how do we do better by working together. And the last one is, of course, do not do it only for the money. When a collaborative gets funding, it's very tempting to say, woo, I'll join the collaborative, I'll get some cash there and be able to do things that I am not able to do over the normal course of events or with the constraints I currently have. And obviously we know that most media outlets now, whether they are legacy or whether they are startups, are constrained, resources are scarce. But you should resist the impulse of doing it only for the money. The idea is to develop a different kind of relationship, a different kind of connection, not just to get some cash so that you can go and do what you want or the way you always did things. The idea is try to do something different. And of course, you will get money. At least through the local media project, all our collaboratives got substantive funding. And they were able to do better reporting because of that. But that should not be the only reason. Alex? So you need to calibrate your expectations when you think about all of these requirements to join the type of collaborative that our model proposes. Think of it as a marathon. It is not a sprint. Journalists, we are very action-oriented and very goal-oriented. And the next day, we forgot the story that we did yesterday because we're on to another story. But being in a collaborative, in a local media ecosystem, the way we are proposing it, it's a marathon. It's a long-haul thing. And what you're looking at is deep problems that are affecting your community, deep challenges that are affecting your community. And those don't go away from Monday to Tuesday. You really need to do long-term reporting to alter the perceptions or to bring new information to your community about these deep and pressing issues. It is also an ecosystem. And think about it, you are one component of that ecosystem. You're a component of the collaborative, but you're also a component of the larger ecosystem that is made up of audiences, it's made up of the authorities in your community, it's made up of the nonprofit sector, it's made up of a variety of entities. Don't think of it as, say, the solar system, where your news organization is the sun and everything is revolving around it, but think of this as the Olympic rings. Everybody's interconnected, and when you do something, it causes a change in something else, and you need to be cognizant of that. You are not something that is, or your organization or your collaborative is not something that is separate from the ecosystem, but it is within the ecosystem. And also, again, it's a constant flow. It's a marathon, it's a flow. You need to be ready to adapt. As journalists, we lack in adaptive capabilities. We look at a different context from the one we have been working in for many years, and we feel lost. We don't know whether we're going to measure up. But this is an opportunity to stretch, to think differently, and to create new connections, both with other news outlets in your community, but also with your community that you're serving. As Amy pointed out, all of these issues need to be hashed out before you actually launch into your reporting project and into your audience engagement strategy. Some of our collaboratives have spent months hashing out these things, and whether they should invite this one or whether they shouldn't invite that one, or who wants to join or who thinks that this is not for them. And they memorialize all of these agreements in a memorandum of understanding that has no legal value, but certainly serves as a guide for the collaborative to move forward. These are conditions or rules of the game that everybody agrees to. And the discussions can get pretty heated at times, but it is very important to hash this out, because the more you solve all of these contingencies at the beginning, the more likely it is that once you start reporting and once you start working together, it's going to be very smooth. So next, Alex, please. I am going to turn it over now.
So we are, Alex is going to refresh the slides there for a minute so we can catch a glitch. This next section, we're going to talk to you about how you can start a collaborative. We've given you some background. We've given you some foundation, some context about collaboratives, but now we're going to help you think about, if you are thinking or a part of a collaborative, how you can think about topic, the size and the number of people involved, how you build consensus, one of the challenges, talk about project managers and how necessary and critical they are, before we wrap up here and move into a Q&A. So I will turn it back over to Liza to talk to you about who to think about as partners in a collaborative.
Yes, size and composition. Next. Who should or who could be a partner in a collaborative, or in the model of collaborative that we advocate for? It doesn't have to be only news organizations. News organizations definitely are the vital component of all platforms, hyperlocals, community outlets, but there are other very, very important players that can really enhance and support the work of a collaborative, such as libraries. Chris is here from the Charlotte Journalism Collaborative, and that collaborative has a gold star partner in the Charlotte Library that has been an excellent participant throughout. In the now 4 years, I think, that the collaborative has been alive. Higher education institutions can also be very, very, very helpful. Again, in Charlotte, you have Queen's University. Resolve in Philadelphia has Temple, that has been since inception there. And all our collaboratives have a higher education institution that can be very, very helpful, providing students for engagement, providing all kinds of resources, Temple, for example, started the website when Resolve was in its pre-Resolve era, which was the reentry project. So there are a number of resources that higher education institutions can provide. And of course, eventually, a collaborative, after 2 years with us, could become a part of that higher education institution. Non-partisan civic organizations, research centers, for example, are very useful. Data centers. We have a collaborative now that is working with a disinformation center in Pennsylvania. Arts organizations, theater groups, choral groups. Delaney and I are going this week to our collaborative in Central Pennsylvania. They will be unveiling premiering the play that they have put together based on their reporting around renewables. How could they do this? Because they have a theater group that is part of the collaborative. So one can be very, very creative with arts organizations and find that they are an excellent avenue to disseminate information in a very innovative way. Other nonprofits, of course, can also be part of a collaborative, and student journalists can be very, very, very useful, and they are always also very enthusiastic. So that's a plus for them. Next. We get asked, how big should a collaborative be? And our answer is, it depends. One member of a collaborative once accused us of being wishy-washy because we do not give specific ideas. You need to have 10 participants in your collaborative, or 5 participants, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. Our only requirement is that you do solutions journalism and you go through that mindset shift in terms of working with your peers. So how big should one be? It depends. It depends on your environment. It depends on your context. It depends on how many outlets your local ecosystem has. By the way, I should point out that when we talk about local media ecosystem, what comes to mind immediately is a city, Charlotte, Philadelphia. But we also have statewide collaboratives that function in or operate in such small states that really actually have less population than the city of Philadelphia, and that would be New Hampshire and Delaware, but they are mighty. And so for them, when they think about who can join the collaborative, this is a very different proposition from thinking, okay, who in Philadelphia will join the collaborative, and try to make it as open to everyone. And if they do not want to participate, that's fine. This is a free country. If they don't see the value, there is no point in insisting or in asking them to persist in asking them to join, because it's not going to work. We've had cases where news outlets did not want to join at the beginning, and then they requested, could they join? Because they saw how well the collaborative was doing. We had cases where we had defections. Fortunately, I think we can count with the fingers in both hands the defections from collaboratives. Once you're in it and once you get going and you start seeing the value, we have seen very, very, very few defections. But again, this is all voluntary. You don't need to be there. But if you are there, you have to want to be there. So what are the needs? What does your collaborative need? Can you have only online platforms? Can you have? No, you really need a mix. And you also need to be representative of your community. One thing that we ask of our collaboratives is we need you to reflect the local media ecosystem that you serve. So if you have a large African-American community, there has to be an African-American news outlet. If you have a large Arab community like Detroit, you have to have a representative of that community participating. Many of our collaboratives have LGBTQ outlets participating. So definitely this is something. They must be solutions-oriented, our collaboratives, and they must be representative of the community they serve. Next. So you decided what size your collaborative is going to be. And when we talk about small versus large, Philadelphia at this moment has over 24 members. They started with 7, the original, about 6 years ago, when they were not yet resolved. They were the reentry project, and now they are 24. So Salt Lake is also a very large collaborative, but Charlotte has remained quite petite, I would say. It's not even 12 members. We have a small collaborative also in northern New Jersey, 8 or 9 members. So as long as it fills the requirements that we were, that we were referencing in terms of being representative of the community, you can be a small collaborative that has advantages and disadvantages. Of course, a smaller collaborative is easier to manage. There's fewer people to argue with, and it can be more focused as well. It can move faster. Obviously, 7 people can decide something sooner than 24 people. Normally that happens. I was thinking of the US Congress, and all of a sudden I got a glitch in my thought process. But there are challenges, of course. If it's smaller, it can't reach it doesn't have the reach that a bigger collaborative would have. And also there's the burnout potential, because we are aware that the model of collaborative that we propose, it's a lift. It means doing things differently. It is a lift, and so you have to be ready to really invest. And so there is burnout potential if you don't have 24 people to share the additional load, but you only have 7 people. But if we go to the next slide, we can see what large collaboratives face. The benefits of a large collaborative, of course, they have a bigger reach. There are more participants to share the workload. There are more participants to think of audience engagement events, be more creative, have them be more frequent. And of course, the diversity is also likely to be higher if you have 24 outlets as opposed to 8 outlets. Even though, as I said, you can be representative with 8 outlets, but chances are if you have 24, you have a wider variety. Now, the challenges are logical. It's harder to manage, especially for us journalists who like to argue, who like to question, who like to just take that little view and build on it and continue to follow that perspective when others are thinking about something else. So they are harder to manage. And of course, keeping the scope of work tight. We've noticed that our larger collaboratives tend to get sidetracked a little bit because a participant wants to bring in an angle for the topic that has been chosen that isn't quite the angle that the main collaborative was considering, but of course this now needs to be taken into account. So it's a little bit harder to keep the scope of the work tight and keep your focus tight. But when you are considering a collaborative in your local media ecosystem, these are some of the perspectives that you need to take into consideration. There is no right or wrong. It's just a matter of paying attention and being very intentional about what are the needs of the community you serve and what are the participants on the field that you need to tap or you need to reach out to. Next. So choosing a topic and building consensus. One of the characteristics of our collaborative also is that can we just move to the next, Alex, to the next slide? Thank you. That we ask our collaboratives when they launch to focus on one topic only. Choose something that you know it is already a pressing issue for your community and continues to be a chronic challenge, has never been solved, has not been looked at with a solutions perspective. And why do we ask that? We ask that for several reasons. First of all, we know that it's easier to keep your focus tight if you are looking at only one thing. If you choose 5 topics, then it becomes much more difficult to manage, or 6 topics, or you just do catch as catch can, whatever presents itself in the community, and you'll report on it. Staying on one topic that everybody knows is a problem, as in Charlotte, for example, it's affordable housing. We have actually, Fort Wayne is affordable housing too. Dallas is affordable housing. So clearly, this is a pressing problem for many communities. But as Amy mentioned, we have many others, mental health, the survival of the Great Salt Lake, the care of our elderly, caregiving for our elderly populations. So the topic has to be something that is understood to be an issue in your community, and it really, everybody knows about it and has not been resolved. But we also ask you to focus on one topic because that eliminates the competitive edge or lowers the competitive edge. We feel that our collaboratives call for a different kind of collaboration that we journalists are not used to. We are taught to be competitive. We're taught to elbow any rival out of the way to get the story. But these endemic problems in our communities really, they do not have scoops. We already know what they are. They are complex, they are massive, they are long-standing. And so we need more than one outlet to really focus on it in depth. So that's why we ask our collaboratives, those are the reasons why we ask our collaboratives to focus on one pressing problem. Also because it's easier to measure your impact. That's the third reason why we ask our collaboratives to focus on one problem. One thing you want to show is impact, both impact that the coverage is having on the participants, but also how is it changing the conversation in the community. And focusing on one topic makes it much easier than if you're focusing on 2 or 3. Before you, again, launch into reporting, what we suggest to our collaborators is, you know what the pressing problem is, but are you sure? So consult. And there are many consultation mechanisms that our collaborators have used. They've used town halls, surveys. They've checked their own coverage. In Delaware, for example, that they are focusing on polarization. They took a look at what the outlets had done regarding polarization to see what perspectives they had taken and how could they build on that with a solutions perspective, and do a landscape research to see who are the communities that are underserved, who are the communities affected by this but really are not represented in the coverage, or the coverage has not been built for them. Central Pennsylvania, for example, is very, very interested in reaching the emerging Hispanic communities in that area. They are working on renewables and renewable sources of energy. And these communities are in the front line because they are the workers in these industries and the workers in the fossil fuel industries. And yet they really do not have the information they need to understand and make informed decisions. So these are all, crowdsourcing is another one. There are many, many tools, mechanisms that you can use, but just double check. Your gut feeling is, I know what the pressing problem is, but double check, validate it by consulting with the community. And then, of course, they will become your first audiences when you ramp up your coverage. Next, Alex.
All right, thank you. So as Liza mentioned, what we've learned is that solutions journalism in its design provides an opportunity for partners to connect around an important topic or issue that expands coverage to benefit the community. It really ties to our individual missions of providing news and information to the public, and in doing so helps eliminate a lot of that competition. But building consensus can be one of the most important things for a project manager or anyone starting a collaborative. And it is a job that may evolve, but really never ends. You might hear early concerns about fear of getting scooped, but those break down with time and as you build relationships within the collaborative. This relationship building happens not only with the publisher, but it also happens with reporters. It's important to create opportunities for reporters and all the members to also connect around a topic where they learn to work through story ideas together, share contacts, and most importantly, build coalitions. How can we build success when and where people join forces, share resources, and collaborate? The first thing you start thinking about is who is in the collaborative. This is early work around mission and vision, because you start thinking about who the work is for. Who are you trying to reach? How do you define those segments of your audience and start working together to create those personas? This Venn diagram shows what those relationships might look like. Think about who should be at the table. As Liza mentioned earlier, you should also think beyond your typical newsroom community. Touching on this again, libraries, universities are becoming the most common, but also think about museums, nonpartisan community groups, local artists, neighborhood associations, etc. Some partners might be there for a singular project of the collaborative, and some will become important partners in the formation and development of the journalism collaborative's work. We also start thinking about equity here. We have to think about who is invited to our table, and also, is our table big enough? Now remember, we're doing news in different ways, so we also have the opportunity to build a new table. Things to consider and some questions you can start asking are, what are the organizational goals would be most important for you to pursue through collaborative partnerships? What topics or stories would be you'd be most interested in exploring as part of collaboration? Are you interested in collaborating for the purpose of reaching new audiences? If so, who are those audiences? And who are you interested in collaborating with? These questions can be used when you start approaching potential partners, and collaborations can include coverage of a specific geographic area, sharing content, reaching and engaging new audiences, sharing ideas and expertise around reporting specific beats, sharing ideas and expertise around operations and fundraising, and really the combination of these things. Slide. So what's next? Communication is key, but honestly, don't try to overthink it. I really should have chosen the gift that didn't just repeat and go crazy. But it's important to ask the collaborative partners what they're comfortable with. If only 1 or 2 newsrooms are active on Slack, then maybe it's not the time to initiate a Slack channel. Perhaps Google Docs is the best option. Keep it simple, but create tools that everyone can access and use collaboratively. Meetings involve conversations about critical and developmental phases. And part of the work of a project manager is to help identify which is which. This is the part of the guiding practice, but should include buy-in from the full collaborative. In doing so, strategic planning, involve everyone's perspective and consider naming ownership of certain long-range goals to individual partners. How decisions are made can be very important. It's important to have open, honest discussions and that they're encouraged and celebrated. Like Maura, give everyone an opportunity to respond. After you've decided to collaborate, think about other things like what areas would the organization be most interested in receiving support through the collaboration? What do they need help with? What areas would your organization be most interested in providing support through the collaborative? What skills, resources do you bring with you to the group? As mentioned, this is not transactional. It's about being part of a bigger whole. And so when I first came on as project director of the CJC, I set up one-on-one calls with each partner and talked through these questions. Since the collaboration had been going on for over a year at that point, I also asked partners what they were most proud of and where they thought the collaboration needed improvement. This is a way to continually evolve and grow the collaboration. Slide. In the collaborative scaffolding research that we mentioned earlier, they looked at a 2-pronged response to challenges faced by local news, like the model of the CJC. Solutions journalism serves as a framework and journalism alternative to that traditional problem-focused reporting and collaboration, or collaborative journalism brings together different partners to share and co-create. The research uncovered a developmental life cycle that coming together, sharing stories, co-creating content, and making space for impact. I'll add one additional thing, and that is unexpected outcomes. Be okay with something not working, surprises that happen throughout the process. Remember what was mentioned earlier, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So what happens after a collaborative project is done? And I'm not talking about the full collaboration ending, but maybe it's just a joint publication or a resource guide or a co-reporting project. There is the moment of kind of hesitation after something is accomplished. So this is where that project manager really becomes the project motivator. It's time to motivate the partners, organize around the topic. If you're the project manager, this can involve like creating guiding conversations to the next project that people work on together, or an opportunity for collaboration. How do you tie it all together? As you start to have conversations, you might ask, what did we learn from that project? What was the community response? Consider doing another town hall or another survey. You'll recycle these conversations about the needs of the community as you grow and evolve the collaborative to constantly gauge your success toward vision and mission. Also make sure to learn from each collaborative practice. Did we think about publishing order? Did we not think about this perspective or that perspective? How are we addressing equity in our work and in our processes? The role of the project manager here really truly becomes a project motivator in guiding the partners through these conversations that involves cheerleading about the successes and encouraging active participation in the continuing project. Slide.
All right, great. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about timelines. We've touched on this because it really does touch almost every other topic that we've already gotten into here today. I'm also excited about this because I've been working on this program from the beginning. And when we first started, we had some ideas about how our collaboratives would progress. Some were right, some were wrong. Some were just unexpected lessons. So what we're going to focus today is more on what to do with your time and how to think about timelines, similar to the size discussion, pros and cons, considerations for all types, rather than just going over the timelines that we saw. And this is because timelines like size and topic and participation are really not one size fits all. Lots of things can impact your timeline. Often it's funding, especially if that funding is time bound, but it could also be the election cycle, the school year, the fiscal year, changes to your local ecosystem. There are lots of things that can tie into how you set up your timeline and how you think about how to use that time. Also, even if you are planning to continue long-term, let's say you have an open-ended collaboration, you still want to keep an eye on overlapping or competing timelines, which we'll come back to in just a minute. Next. All right, what to do with no time? Let's say you have a short timeline, compressed timeline, not as much time as you thought, running into a big event. Here are the things to kind of think about when you're working on that shorter timeline. You want to think about your impact right away, early and often. You do not want to get to the end of 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and not be able to show what you did, right? So ask yourself, what do I want to say in 1 month, in 3 months, in 6 months, and know how to track it right away. If you want to have 10 new subscribers at the end of your first month, know where that data is. If you want a public comment from the housing czar, set that Google alert, right? So think about where these things are up front. Build relationships. This is never wasted time. This is always time well spent because relationships hold this all together. Establish best practices, but only the ones you need, right? If you're on a shorter timeline. Tap into existing networks and systems and also coordinate your resources. Find a part-time project manager, find a student, pull your editor friend out of retirement to manage your collaborative, find someone who can get this moving pretty quickly, and think about the resources and the systems that you can plug into. If someone is already on Slack Pro, great, just use theirs. If someone already knows Airtable, congratulations, Airtable is your CMS. So don't reinvent the wheel, don't try to build something new, plug into what's already there. Republication, probably self-explanatory, but don't rule this out as a way to build momentum early on. especially if you're working around a topic where there's a really pressing interest, like many of our collaboratives have with housing. And set up editorial small wins early, right? Maybe the Spanish language digital outlet and the radio station have never worked together before, but they're both chasing down this really similar story. You can do a little matchmaking, get them to do it together. All right, and then you have that small win early on. Next. All right, so what to do with some more time? Maybe you have, like we've been saying, 2 whole years, which sounds like a long time, but as we know, it goes by really, really fast. So if you have some more time, again, still want to document everything, still want to think about impact really early on. We talked to a lot of groups who need 2 or 3 months to get going, and they get to the end of those 2 or 3 months and they say, oh my God, where did this time go? What were we even doing during that time? And it was because they weren't documenting, they were making decisions, they were coming up with best practices, they were getting to know each other, right? So again, that's not wasted time, just make sure you write it down. And Liza talked about this earlier, those early conversations can take a while. With metrics and impact, if you have more time, you can put some more details here, right? Maybe you want to bring on a consultant, maybe you want to try a new tool, maybe you want to do something a little bit more experimental. And if you have more time, you can make those decisions and think about those systems a little bit earlier. With best practices, again, you can kind of go deeper, go bigger here when you have more time. Maybe for a short-term collaboration, a one-to-one vote works for making decisions, but maybe for a longer-term collaboration, you want to put a few more parameters around that. Longer-term editorial plans, enterprise reporting, kind of self-explanatory. These are things you can do with a longer timeline. And last up, I mentioned this before, those overlapping timelines. If you have a longer term project, this is definitely going to come up, right? Even if you only have a single funder, you need to be thinking about what is their timeline, right? When is their board meeting? Are they voting on renewing your funding anytime soon? When are you reporting to them? When are they reporting to other funders, right? When is the election? When is the school board meeting? When are these things happening in your community? So when you have that longer term project, it's always good to be aware of those overlapping timelines, because especially as journalists, I know all journalists hate being caught off guard. So you definitely don't want to be caught off guard with those overlapping timelines. Last up, I'll just mention really quick here with the longer timelines. Also think about what other folks can learn from you, right? At the end of a year or 2 years, you've learned so much together working with your collaborative. These make great blog posts, right? This is a growing field. This is a field with a lot of interest. So think about what can folks be learning from you. Next. All right, so really excited to talk about what we've learned about audience engagement. Let me start by saying that collaboratives are really well suited to doing deep and responsive audience engagement. Every time we talk to a new collaborative, they say something like, well, we're not Cincinnati, it's different here. Well, we're not Phoenix, it's different here. And that's true, that's true. Your community is unique and you know it best. So that's why these projects are so well suited to this really deep audience engagement. Next. All right, so one of our favorite topics. One of the best ways to start thinking about how to reach your audience is to think about who's in your collaborative. One really good way to do that, one way we always suggest, is doing an asset map. Now, really quick explanation, an asset map is something that can tell you what kinds of skills exist within your collaborative already. What kinds of special skills do people have? What kind of communities are folks already tapped into? This can help you understand who you're reaching, who you're not reaching, who you'd like to reach, or just, interesting connections. This one you can see at the bottom, there were some folks involved in community theater. There's a connection right there for an interesting partnership. Next. Okay, the super scientific hammer scale. This was an informal internal resource that Alex helped us with. And I bring this up just to say that there are all kinds of audience engagement activities. Some are not only more of a financial investment, but some are also more of like a time and effort investment, right? So something like, putting together a 2-year-long advisory board with facilitated discussions and expert panelists and paid honoraria and reports and blogs. That's a lot of work. That's like a 4-hammer job, right? Asking the local theater group if you can have coffee with some people before the show starts, that's like a 2 or 3-hammer job, right? So just to say, you know, there are lots of ways to do this. You don't have to start with a 5-hammer activity, right? You can start with a 2 or 3-hammer activity to get going. Next. All right, project management. Heard this term come up a few times, so let's get into it. So if you've made it this far and you have ever had an idea that you've tried to make real, you are asking by this point, how does this come together? How does this stay together? How do you keep this going? So enter the project manager. Big shout out to all of our project managers, some of whom are on this call and who show up very consistently twice a month to our collaborative project managers water cooler. This section would not exist without all of them. So, you know, all of them, I see you. Next up. All right, so what happens without a project manager? Short version, not a whole lot. We always say our collaboratives are not prescriptive. That's true, but we do basically require all of our collaboratives to have a project manager, and here's why. Very occasionally, someone will come to us and say, I think we can do this without a project manager. And just, you're not going to see a whole lot happening. Next. Right, so I want to go over kind of the 2 main myths of project management. So these are like the 2 things that we hear the most when folks are not really seeing, you know, why they need this. So myth number 1, won't it just be more work for me, the participant? In our model, the project managers report to the collaborative. Doesn't matter if they're on contract at the fiscal sponsor, doesn't matter if they are, you know, a part-time student, a part-time professor, they report to the collaborative. So we do get this question from participants, isn't this just more work for me to manage this person? Short answer, no, it's not more work. Project manager is there to make your life easier. This is a totally incomplete, very short list of some things that a project manager can do to make your life easier. And keep in mind, as they're doing all of these things, they're also building connections, not just among the participants, but also with vendors, folks in the community, folks at other outlets, you know, all these different places. So in doing all of these things, they're also building relationships all the time, which is invaluable. And eventually they often transition into working on fundraising and sustainability. Next. All right, myth number 2, we hear this one a lot too. Nobody has all those skills. We'll never find the right person. No one understands the editorial side and also has management skills. This person doesn't exist. Oh no. So we hear this one a lot. It's not true, but this is a 2-parter, right? This is a true but. So true. No one has every single necessary skill when they first start this job. But project managers come from all kinds of backgrounds. We've had successful project managers from all different kinds of places, all different kinds of backgrounds. Lots of journalism skills are transferable. Lots of fundraising is writing, right? Lots of fundraising is researching and writing. There's also a lot of coaching and learning on the job that goes on. As more collaboratives pop up across the country, there are more and more project managers, right, to learn from. Also, if you've never facilitated a meeting between 13 people with 13 different opinions, best way to learn how to do it is to do it. So, and there's also growing interest in this role, right? Folks are learning all the time that this is a really, really important role. And so there's more and more interest, there are more resources, there's more discussion, there is more kind of scaffolding, right, around this role. Next. All right, so if you have questions about that last one, right, more interest around this role, you are in luck. Chris Rudisill and I are leading a project management for journalism collaborations workshop with the Center for Cooperative Media on November 15th. This is an online version of an in-person workshop that myself and Leah Todd Lynn, our previous collaborative, or erstwhile team member, led at the Collaborative Journalism Summit in June in Washington, D.C. So this is a very hands-on workshop, so it is more geared towards building those skills. But if you have questions about what this role entails, what kinds of things a project manager can expect to encounter, please register and we will see you there. And now I believe I am turning it back to Liza Gross to talk about funding and sustainability.
Yes, thank you, Delaney. And I know that we're extending ourselves a little bit, eating into the question and answer session. And I think that I see in the chat that there are many questions that have been very active, and we'll get to that. So, but I'm going to take a couple of minutes to talk about sustainability and funding, both from the viewpoint of what it is that the person seeking or the entity seeking the funds has to do, and also some ideas or suggestions for the funders that make available philanthropic dollars. Can we see the next slide? Of course, sustainability is a much broader term. It can entail many, many types of revenue streams. It can be sponsorships, it can be advertising, anything can lead to sustainability, a signature event. But here I'm going to give a little overview about philanthropic dollars. There is ample evidence that philanthropic support for journalism has increased exponentially over the past 5 years. According to the Boston Consulting Group, it's up to $150 million a year, and it's still not enough. And we as journalists still really also are not very clear, how do we go about seeking philanthropic dollars to support our work? So here is how, our collaboratives have gotten monetary support on their own. In other words, we sustain them for 2 years, but then we cut the cord and say, hey, you're on your own, and you need to have a strategy for how you're going to get the money to survive. So if you focus on the philanthropic dollars aspect of your sustainability plan, you have to build an intentional path to that. You have to build a multi-stream strategy. We tend as journalists to say, oh my goodness, Foundation X gave us $30,000 to focus on climate change reporting. And once that is up, okay, the money ran out and we move on to something else. Well, if you really are committed to climate change reporting, you really want to sustain that. In the same way that we tell our collaboratives, if you're really focused on caregiving, on affordable housing or lack of affordable housing, on the preservation of the Great Salt Lake, you really need to build a multi-stream strategy. You need to be talking to several types of funders. You need to be cultivating them. Nothing happens from one day to the next. You need to know that it will take months sometimes to get that philanthropic, to get a commitment from the funders for your philanthropic, for philanthropic support. So you need to build it out. Who are the funders that are working or are supporting your space? What are the conditions under which they grant money? You need to know all this. All this information is available. You need to do a little bit of research. There are some, of course, that are very well known to us, national funders, like the Knight Foundation, and now, Press Forward. I think even journalists in Pluto and Jupiter have heard of this initiative. But there's also the place-based funders that we feel are really, really the key to supporting our place-based collaboratives. So as you are building your research and realizing, okay, national foundations, place-based foundations, you need to be also specific and clear in your ask. what can I ask this foundation for, and how should I do it? Don't go there saying, give it to me because I am a journalist and I am covering important topics. That really is not going to cut it. We need to be much, much more sophisticated with our ask, and have the ask be congruent with the type of work we're able to deliver. Collaboratives, of course, we are persuaded, and we have seen it, that have built for themselves a much stronger position to go to a funder, because they are really not representing themselves individually, but they are representing the needs of a whole media ecosystem. So do your homework. Next slide. So for funders, for place-based funders, for many place-based funders, and for those aspiring collaboratives that hope to get some funding from place-based funders, they are relatively new to the space. I mean, the nationals have been doing this now for a while, besides the Knight Foundation, that is, of course, the gold standard for supporting journalism. But Ford, Carnegie, all of the big ones have been doing it for a while. But place-based funders are relatively new. Community foundations are relatively new. And they need to understand that the right information flows that are inclusive and equitable in their community are important to their mission, regardless of what their mission is. Their mission has to do with improving the welfare of the community they serve, and your journalistic mission is aligned with that. So affordable housing, for example, they are not funding journalism. They are funding organizations that can generate and disseminate important information around affordable housing. Place-based funders also, if they are a little bit squeamish about saying, okay, I will go into this space, but it's terra incognita and I don't quite know what to do, should talk to other place-based funders. So when you go to a place-based funder and ask for support, and the place-based funder tells you, well, we don't do that, or we're a little bit leery about doing that, suggest that they talk to other place-based funders about their experience, who really, really have been doing great work for a while with this. And I can name Courtney Benston in Wichita, for example, Allison Levine in Delaware. These are two examples of place-based funders that are really, really understanding and promoting the support of their local media ecosystem. And if you're a funder, start with a modest investment with clear goals. And if you are someone seeking funds, come with not a giant menu that cannot be parsed out, but a menu that can really be broken down into pieces, so that you can say, well, we could start with this, and these are the clear goals, and these are the deliverables. And of course, at that time, make sure that your expectations are congruent with the funding that's made available. Many funders will tell you, okay, we'll give you $10,000 and jump through 15,000 hoops, write 55 proposals, and give us 15 reports at the end. You need to make sure that the expectations are congruent with the funding that is made available. Maybe $10,000 is not going to help you achieve your goal. So you need to walk away from that, because otherwise you will be making a commitment as a grantee that is really going to be more trouble than it's worth for you. And as a funder, you are going to be disappointed as well, because there is no connection there between the funding that is made available to achieve the goals that have been articulated. And also, if you're a funder, do not be afraid of making your grantee accountable. You want to know what happened to that money. And as a grantee, you really want to tell your funder what you did with that money, because that is the door for the next iteration of funding. You really want to maintain that communication, that constant communication with your funder, and make them aware of every accomplishment, of every innovative things that you put in play, of every great result that you've obtained. That's why impact, as Chris was mentioning, is so important to measure and to be able to have handy when you really want your funder to be aware of how you are using their money. And don't be afraid of sending this unannounced. Oh, here is this that we want you to make aware of. And perhaps the funder will not respond immediately, but you know they got it. So when we think about philanthropic dollars, this is an intentional strategy. This is something that we need to invest in as a collaborative. And we really need to create those relationships, forge those relationships with the place-based foundations, which are the ones that are really, really invested in the community that we as a collaborative are also invested in. Next.
All right, guys. Sorry we're running a little bit over time here, but we're gonna get to your Q&As right now. I just wanted to remind you that we are sending out a mini guide. As Amy said, it's more like 50 pages, so it's not quite so small, but a mini guide full of resources and links for you to use to check out some examples of some important documents that we've used with our collaboratives, as well as click some links into some resources that can lead you to more information. For now, I'm gonna just skip right past this and pass it back to Amy.
Thanks, Alex. And thanks all of you for hanging in. There's a lot we can share, and we've gone over into our Q&A time. I hope that you've been able to stick around, and those who have had to leave, we hope to capture you somehow. Alex, you can take us off, stop sharing the screen before I pass it to Chris to share questions that people have asked in the chat and Q&A. The questions that we don't get to today, we will give you answers. And this is a surprise announcement to my colleagues also, but what we will be doing is recording answers to your questions in a format where we will come to kind of a table talk. We'll come together. Those questions that we aren't able to answer, we'll ask them, and we will tell you, and we will send you a recording of those that we don't get to today, so that we can keep it to 15 minutes, since I know we have people who have to drop off. So I'm going to pass it to Chris. He's been putting together these questions, and we'll try to capture those that are similar and answer them for the next 15 minutes. Chris?
Perfect. So the first one was a kind of a clarification. I think, Liza, you mentioned that the collaboratives are not just extractive or transactional, but you're each gaining and contributing in part of the project, not just to get access to audience, et cetera. That is correct, right? And I just wanted to see if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I think that we've made that, we cannot stress that point enough. If the collaborative is not representative of the characteristics of the local media ecosystem, we will not succeed in making or in producing editorial content that's inclusive and more equitable. And of course, over the course of interacting with 15 collaboratives, we have really validated that point.
Perfect. And the next question was, can a collaboration work among fledgling news organizations that are still in startup mode if more established players in town aren't interested? And thinking about how competition often fades, like tying this question to that too, how do you manage competition among those fledgling news organizations that may be trying to attract the same audience?
Chris, do you want to weigh in on that, since you are a project manager and know about the whole competition, the mindset, and then we can answer also about fledgling startup organizations and how you can bring them in, especially if the legacy news organizations aren't interested.
Sure. I think, for us, there was some hesitation among some of the smaller news organizations, and really, do they have a fighting chance in a collaborative? Will they be overshadowed by the larger publications, et cetera, and, or larger media outlets? And I think, it comes back to that building relationships. In the end, those smaller news organizations actually would probably say they benefited more from the collaboration. They learned about, new things like, finding grants and finding financial support. They had access to bigger resources. And one of the biggest things they found was that they were now at the table. They were, they were part of those conversations with the larger publishers that maybe didn't even know who they were before. So I think it goes back to that importance of just building relationships and making the space for those relationships to blossom. We had this question a little bit about funding and about money, and it comes to how the partners decide how to designate their money or create their budgets. In the end, our larger publications actually took less money from the collaborative budget, and they funneled that money back into the collaborative work. So some of it is evolution, but a lot of it is just about building those relationships. And I think you'll find from most of the collaboratives in SJN that the smaller partners actually felt that they may have benefited the most.
The small organizations that are in startup and competing for the audience, I think is part of the mindset is if you're choosing a specific topic for a collaborative, which is far easier than just saying we collaborate, then you can work together on ways to attract audiences. People are going to go to your organization or your news organization to get their news, but you can collectively talk about how you can individually attract those audiences in the collaborative thinking, and you may have different strategies in your news organization. But for startups that are probably thin on resources, at least at the beginning, that collaboration around a specific topic can really help you launch into deeper reporting and community engagement that then kind of filters to your individual news organizations. That's not to say that you have to, but while you're also independently fundraising, if you're a nonprofit, of fundraising for your specific organization. So it may be a little competition at the fundraising dollars, but it doesn't have to be competition at the editorial level.
And I'll add, this is another reason for that asset mapping early on. It gives a chance for the potential partners to identify how they are part of this collaborative. It provides some ownership for each partner, and it gives them a chance to see the strengths of each organization as part of the collaborative. Okay. Anything else?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. How do you balance building trust between newsrooms and organizations versus building trust between the collaborative and the community? Are these similar strategies? I thought that was a great question.
Great question.
Delaney or Liza, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yes. Let's be clear that this takes time and goes back to what I was saying, that you need to really want to be there, because it is a mindset shift. I always say, and they laugh about it now, in Philadelphia, when they first started, it looked like a crowded subway car in New York in the summer with no air conditioning. Everybody was tense. Everybody was standing in their personal space. Nobody wanted to look at anybody. It was so unwelcoming. The first 3 or 4 meetings, nobody wanted to be the first one to say anything, just in case. And then when they started saying things, they started saying heavy things, things that the legacy newsroom thought about smaller newsrooms, things that smaller newsrooms thought about the legacy newsroom. And somehow they worked it out. But that's why we underscore the periodic meeting is a must. And some groups can do it online or via Zoom, or you can do a hybrid, but really there is no substitute for the face-to-face. And that's why also we work with local media ecosystems where everybody more or less has the ability to come and see each other. I have never been in an in-person meeting when they have a hybrid arrangement, like in Delaware, where they don't say at the end of the meeting, this has been so productive, we got so much done. Yes, because the in-person factor and food and chatting about other things, football or baseball or whatever, creates a totally different dynamic. So getting together often and really pushing and powering through those uncomfortable moments go a long way to build trust. If we compare the tenor of the meetings when our collaboratives start, and then a year later, how they interact, how they talk about. We've had one collaborative that was not a success, and I think that part of the reason was that they were never really able to establish those comfort lines. But it does take months, where you were going against the current of something that happened in one way for a very long time, and we need to reverse that.
Great, thank you. Another question that Delaney shared the example of Central PA, but a question about climate solutions being too broad of a topic, especially because it touches on so many other topics in the community. So I'm going to kind of reframe the question to how broad is a topic, or can a topic be informing a collaborative, and what would be your suggestions?
Well, when a solutions journalism, we very frequently say having a topic that is that broad is challenging. You need to take what we say, you take a piece of pie or a pizza and take one slice of it. You're not going to eat the whole thing at once. With climate, there's so many intersections between climate and mental health, climate and preparedness, emergency preparedness, climate. So saying climate change, particularly if you're doing solutions journalism around it, is, we would say, too broad. You need to bring it in, focus on that so that you're able to, in a collaborative environment, share with each other your expertise, particularly if you have news organizations that have climate or environment reporters. Choosing a topic is going to not only make it easier for coverage, whether you're doing it collaboratively or not, but it's going to make it easier to, number one, determine how you can collaborate on stories together, track your impact, and because if you say get to funders, if you go to a funder and say, we want to cover climate change, that funder is going to say, well, what about it? And narrowing that topic, the focus of that topic is just going to help really in every aspect of a collaborative. So I'd really encourage you to come up with that intersection, to find where that intersection is and the expertise you have and what's going to resonate most with your audiences.
Yeah, I'll just clarify too, because I don't think we have anyone from that Central Pennsylvania group here on the call. When they first started coming together, they saw this as a pressing issue in their community, specifically as sort of, what people say is like the forgotten Rust Belt, right? That part of Pennsylvania. And they talked a lot about how this is really a community that's kind of on the front lines of a lot of these transitions. So they're also looking at, like, they'll often pitch it to folks as, climate adaptation, or the just transition, or things like that. So they're not only focused, but like they're not focused on solutions to climate change. They're focused on climate adaptation in Central Pennsylvania, focused on certain communities. So just to clarify, that's not their topic is not that broad, but that is how they started, right? That's where the conversation started before they narrowed it. So just to clarify, because I know they're not here to describe that themselves.
And I'll also add that you can, getting kind of granular or focused on a specific aspect of a topic allows you to also expand in the future. So for example, with the Charlotte Journalism Collaborative, our focus has been on affordable housing, but those conversations are now, kind of going into, do we talk about affordable housing and transportation, or access to certain resources, like childcare? Like, is that another spin-off of our initial collaboration? So it doesn't say you can't talk about this or can't report on this, but it actually creates an opportunity for the collaborative to evolve.
Likewise, for the caregiving collaborative, now they are moving to health equity. For the first year and a half, they did caregiving of the elderly, particularly in communities of color, and now they are moving to the broader topic of health equity.
All right, next question is a revenue question. Is it acceptable or desirable for a collaborative to attract new advertisers interested in reaching the collaborative's audience? And you touched on this a bit, Liza. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, definitely. Unfortunately, of course, I only, because of time parameters, I focused only on philanthropic dollars. But absolutely, that advertising is an acceptable revenue stream. It has been for newspapers and for broadcast for many, many, many decades. So definitely, it's something to consider.
Perfect. I'm going to try to pull this together around cross-pollinations and collaborations across larger areas. Delaney, you mentioned the New York and Michigan collaborative as an example, but we had some questions around what is your advice and guidance, or how does your advice and guidance shift or not when thinking of national versus local collaboratives and topic-based versus geographic collaboratives? Anyone?
Can I pick it up? As you know, as we mentioned throughout this whole presentation, this model was conceived for a local media ecosystem. However, we have been, like the collaboratives, evolving and experimenting with different connections and different networking possibilities. Right now, for example, in Pennsylvania, 3 collaboratives in Pennsylvania are working on together on a collaboration connected to the elections and election coverage. So that would be a collaborative of collaboratives. We've moved that, to the next level. We've also created affinity groups from various representatives of different collaboratives. Delaney launched the project managers group. We, with Alex and I are working on a Hispanic affinity group. This group, which is made up of very small news outlets throughout the country, are shedding some light into different perspectives on how to look at the Latino electorate, not so much in this stereotypical way that mainstream media tends to address the issue of Hispanic voters. So there are, of course, we know that there are some ways of rethinking or evolving our local media ecosystem collaboratives into larger things from the bottom up. But some, we have not worked on yet, like a global collaborative on affordable housing would be wonderful, but that, I think it's a little ways away. The issue is, of course, audience engagement becomes a little bit more complex, funding becomes a little bit more complex, so we would need to think that through. But I am convinced that there are models yet to be discovered, and we need to really advance this field.
Great. And I shared 2 resources in the chat on 2 other questions. One, audience engagement work or community engagement work by collaboratives, that I posted in the chat with a link to the SJN guide on gathering towards solutions. And there was also a question on scale of impact. So I put the SJN guide on impact tracking in the chat as well. But there are additional resources on Solutions Journalism's website, Solutions Journalism Network's website, that you can gather.
Thanks, Chris, for helping us with the answers. We got to some of them, but we will follow up with you. We again, the resource guide, the recording of this. Thank you for your time today. Thank you to my colleagues for the excellent advice and information, context, history that they shared with you in this really important but very highly successful work that we have done. We're quite proud of it. As you can see, we can talk a lot about it. And please do sign up for the project management webinar that Chris and Delaney will be doing with the Center for Cooperative Media, and keep in touch. Please reach out to us if you have any specific questions or we didn't get to something that you really would like to talk more about. I know we've had some questions from our Africa colleagues about collaboratives there. And again, thank you for your time, your patience today, and we hope to see you in some network in some way and enjoy collaboration. Thanks, everyone.